Can I invite Priti Patel?
Thank you, Mr. Davis, and it's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship. And I really just must begin by congratulating my honourable friend, the member for Waveney, for securing this debate, but also I just want to pay tribute as well to both him and the honourable member for Cambridge for their leadership of the all-party parliamentary group. It's an important group. And it's a pleasure to follow the honourable member for Clacton as well. I'm very fond of Clacton. I've been a resident of East of England for nearly 17 years, and the honourable member for Clacton will know, I know his constituency relatively well. We campaigned in a by-election together there as well, with good long-term results in the end. But I think it's important to say, Mr. Davis, that in the contributions thus far, there are some very, very serious issues that need to be addressed. Now, I say this as someone that's been the Member of Parliament for Witham for just over 12 years, and the member for Clacton is also now the chairman of GEML, which, for the benefit of Hansard, is a Great Eastern Mainline Task Force, which I co-set up nearly 10 years ago. And of course, GEML was all about getting infrastructure investment into that mainline. We have been successful, and I'm going to touch on some elements of that which have not developed, not materialised, but actually there are important areas which the honourable member for Waveney has highlighted, which really, I'm afraid, speak to some lamentable actions across government. And these very much speak to the low confidence areas that the member for Waveney has touched on. And I want to speak specifically about those. Now, first and foremost, infrastructure, that clearly covers road and rail. It's become a joke, quite frankly, Mr. Davis, in the way in which the overall way in which Whitehall has failed to integrate, and this has nothing to do with the Minister's department at all. This is a failure of Whitehall and the entire Whitehall system to actually work across government departments to integrate funding. So basically, securing investment in our infrastructure is one example of how we can support levelling up. It's a statement of the obvious, as well as the new rolling stock. So we have new rolling stock on our line, part of the GEML task force, for a very good reason, which was because 10 years ago, a decade ago, I and my colleagues across that network went to the then Treasury and Chancellor of the Exchequer, the former member for Tatton, and put forward a business case. Some of us have the capability to put together presentations and business cases in conjunction with Network Rail that secured £600 million that was linked to a 9-year franchise. And that franchise was very much about delivering rolling stock, improvements on productivity, performance, etc., etc. I could go on. And we have achieved that. But that is only one example, because the failure of that task force, and actually not the task force, but of Whitehall, and the lack of integration in Whitehall, is securing funding for two junctions that have already been mentioned in this debate, which is Ely Junction and Hawley Junction. They're not based in my constituency, but they're East of England infrastructure projects that would unlock the economic potential, not just of the East, but of the nation. And it's so interesting at a time when HS2, again, is being vilified for a range of reasons, being over budget, not on time, etc., etc. We have to stick the course, Mr. Davis, with these infrastructure projects. And the problem that we have right now is that the RNet process has not been published. But basically, that's the funding mechanism for securing these major projects of infrastructure. That sits within the Department of Transport. The other big problem that we have, Mr. Davis, is that, quite frankly, we've already heard that the East of England is a net contributor. Well, quite frankly, our main line has been subsidising the rail network for the rest of the country for decades. And again, that money goes to the Treasury. So the revenue base sits with Treasury, and yet the Department of Transport is completely deprived of the funding stream to actually help with the financial pipeline of rail investment. I will give way.
Thank you. I thank my honourable friend for giving way. I would just like to ask her, does she not believe that the investment in Hawley and Ely is a relatively low investment? We're not asking for a lot of money, because it would unblock the blockage. It would take the cork out of the bottle for the entire East-West connection.
Well, my honourable friend, the chair of the GEML Rail Task Force, has hit the nail on the head. But this actually speaks to a failure in Whitehall. fundamentally, and the Honourable Member for Waveney has expressed this point and highlighted this repeatedly, actually. But this is the core message that has to be taken away, and that's just on rail. And of course, rail supports economic growth. The West Anglia line is a classic case as well. 4 trains an hour to Stansted Airport. It feels like Mission Impossible right now. There is some proper work that needs to be undertaken there, and the government needs to support that. We have been successful in getting one particular international airline, which is Emirates, into Stansted. We want to get others, as my honourable friend has said, but also we want to get airlines from India into Stansted Airport as well. On roads in particular, roads, the A12 and A120, again, projects that I have secured as a Member of Parliament, the funding for feasibility studies. Yet again, it goes around the merry-go-round of not getting the commitment from central government to proceed with those schemes because of inadequacies, quite frankly, with Highways England, who failed to operate in a transparent way. They failed to engage with local communities. They failed to engage with the county council that has responsibility for the strategic road network. And again, they're not engaging with the Department of Transport. So we're not getting the road upgrades that we need in the county. And by the way, those road networks are the economic arteries for the east of England. I will give way.
Mr Davis, I'm very grateful for my right honourable friend for giving way. But integration in the planning of infrastructure goes beyond just roads and rail, but also to the integration of offshore wind,
of course,
into the national transmission network. We have radial connections where from offshore wind to the national transmission network only in East Anglia. The rest of the country benefits from the holistic network design. But does my right honourable friend agree with me that East Anglia should be included within the holistic network design and we should move away from these radial connections?
Well, my honourable friend is absolutely right. I was going to come on to energy shortly for another reason, and I'm going to pick up on that point, if I may, because I do just want to conclude on the road issue in particular. Essex is a net contributor. And the A12 and A120 are literally roads from the dark ages. They're also deeply unsafe roads. And if we care about road safety, and, you know, people, and lorries actually, commuters in particular, the people that get up every day, go to work, you know, at the crack of dawn, to service our public services, to come to London, you know, provide services to major hotels, for example, and the service sector in the United Kingdom. We must upgrade these roads. It's becoming a joke right now, it really is. And actually it's an insult to commuters, to the people that use the roads, and to the people that have to navigate the potholes and the poor quality of the roads every single day, who, by the way, feel that they're getting an unfair deal when they fill up their cars with petrol and when you look at the price of fuel as well at the pump. So this is not this is not a criticism of the Minister's Department, but this actually shows the breadth of issues that need to be grasped across government when it comes to integration to provide the outcomes on levelling up. Otherwise, levelling up will just become a slogan. If I may, there are a couple of other areas which I'd like to touch on, Mr Davies. These are both linked. One is skills and education. I'm very proud not just to be the Member of Parliament for Witham, but to represent Essex as a Member of Parliament and the East region. And when I became the Member of Parliament for Witham, I'm afraid the majority of my schools locally were in special measures or required improvements. I'm so pleased to say right now we have great schools, good schools and outstanding schools, and as a result, Witham itself is now a commuter town. People want to live and work there, and the schools are outstanding, and that is a great thing. Now, we also need to not just give our youngsters great educational opportunities through our schools. We need to actually make sure that they can get jobs and that they inherit skills for life. And that could be skills within the region for the great energy coastline that we have now developed, which has been remarkable over the last decade. And there are previous ministers in government that should be thanked, I think, for a lot of work and hard work that's taken place there. But Essex is also a county of entrepreneurs, and I never tire of saying that. We're the home of small businesses, the home of innovators, R&D is very big. But also our prosperity does mask challenges when it comes to deprivation, as we've heard already, but also skills and opportunity and aspiration. We need businesses to be able to work with our schools, get their foot in the door of schools at an earlier age. I have a careers fair taking place on the 24th of March in Whittam. I never tire of being a champion of those skills fairs, but actually bringing in former industries that I have worked in as well into those schools. And I want to see government embrace that, because quite frankly, the apprenticeship levy is not delivering the outcomes that it was originally set up to deliver. And I still maintain the levy needs reforming. And of course, by getting the skills locally, we can not only create jobs, but we can actually have greater skills, focusing on the areas that members have touched on already. And I do feel very strongly about that as well. If I may, I'd just like to touch on health. Health has been raised. The Honourable Member for Waveney said that we don't have a technology campus, basically, in the east of England. I agree with that, and we should work to achieve that. But in health, we have a university medical school, and I was involved in the original bid to do the business case for that, and I'm very proud that we've achieved that. But I'm afraid our health infrastructure is inadequate across the east of England. Patient-GP ratio is one of the highest in the country. We're not training enough students coming through the medical schools. We need to do much more. And in fact, the Right Honourable, well, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, when he was Health Secretary, worked with us very well, actually, to deliver some good health outcomes, but there is so much more that needs to be done. We're an ageing part of the country, but actually with our young people, we must grow the skills in health and social care. And I do also want to pay tribute to Essex County Council for the work that they're doing in that particular area. But this is a very big message, I think, to central government. We cannot have people working in silos anymore in government. And then my previous experience as Home Secretary, then the Health Department then saying, please do much more on health and social care visas, which I'm very pleased that we have done, actually. I did that as Home Secretary, and I think there's more that we need to do in that area, but we also need to grow homegrown talent too. Finally, planning is the biggest issue in my constituency casework. Whittam has become a building site over the last decade. We are building homes, and it's right that we build homes. The question is, are they affordable homes? And you've already heard Mr Davis of the high ratio in terms of income that is required to live in our fantastic part of the country. This is a point that's very specific to the Honourable Member, the Minister's Department. Planning is contentious. We are not getting planning right in this country, there's no doubt about that. And in Essex, and in my constituency in particular, we did stop the garden suburbs, the garden settlement, West Tay development, the proposal for 45,000 new homes, which, by the way, was without any infrastructure at all. I mean, the entire concept was an absolute scandal and a disgrace, and I pay tribute to campaigners such as Rosie Pearson and others in my constituency that really worked with us all to get that to the planning inspectorate and to get that overturned. 5-year land supply has been a problem, along with local councils with no neighbourhood plans. But I do just want to put on the record that I think it's deeply disappointing that the department, in its former guise as MHCLG, used taxpayers' fund, basically, to literally boost up and beef up that concept without actually working in a considered way with the local community in terms of the right kind of housing need that was required. And I'm afraid this is not specific to the Honourable Lady's department right now. We're going through this all over again with another project, which is less about housing, but it will become a planning issue, which is on pylons. The development of pylons across the east of England, which quite frankly will have a detrimental impact. We are pioneers when it comes to offshore and offshore grid in particular, wind farm development and renewables. We must absolutely look to invest in that capability rather than putting up more infrastructure that is going to be detrimental to the local communities, will bring great blight, and I'm afraid I think will also agitate our local communities even more. So in conclusion, Mr Davis, I know I've taken up a great deal of time. There is, great things about the East of England. We are net contributors to Her Majesty's Treasury. We cross-subsidise much of the United Kingdom through the hard graft of the great men and women of the East of England. But we are lagging behind on these key assets. These assets are of national importance and significance. And my message to the Honourable Lady, the Minister in particular, she can only do so much within her remit and her department. There is actually a wider message about devolution, local government reorganisation, but I've also got to say this, the size of the state in Whitehall and how bloated that has become, how unaccountable that has become and how detached that has become from the good men and women of the east of England who as taxpayers seem to contribute to the bureaucracy of Whitehall and get very little back out. That is where the reform has to start. The devolution train is well underway now, certainly in our part of the country, and in Essex I back it, but quite frankly, we need the reform at the core of Whitehall to start delivering from the good people of East of England. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And now, last but not